All right, and then sharing my screen. So today we're talking about economic systems. I want to make sure, yep, okay. So today we're talking about economic systems, and this might be things that you guys haven't heard of before. Last week, what we talked about is something I think most people can relate to. This week is going to be a little bit different than that. And it's not something we're going to spend like our entire class on, or like the whole semester on, but it just is going to go into like there's different types of economies in the world. What are those economies? And let's just talk about them. So, oops, I skipped a slide. So we have our week at a glance up there that you guys have seen before. So today it's read chapter 1, lesson 1, and then I linked the new organizer here so you can start working on that. Tuesday, it's just read and work on your review. And then Thursday, there'll be another quiz up there. Or Wednesday, there'll be another quiz. Thursday, we're going to start a new chapter, and I would like to do an in-class activity related to this American free enterprise system. So in America, we have the ability to have our own homes, have our own businesses, those kinds of things. So there's really something I'd like to do in class if everyone's here. And then I'll also have the chapter 3 review up at that point. I would like to get away from always doing Schoology quizzes as your formatives and trying to do some other more interactive things. I thought for these first couple weeks, just having a Schoology quiz for each chapter would be the easiest. But know that, there's other things I'd like to do in class just besides those quizzes so that you guys aren't bored. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about, I'm just trying to move these guys down a little bit. Like I said, the different kinds of economies. And we're going to start with traditional. Economy is based on tradition. How does a traditional economy answer the 3 basic questions of what, how, and for whom to produce? When you guys are going through your chapter 1 review, you will see that these 3 questions, what, how, and for whom to produce, it's like highlighted, bolded. It's important that you know that these are the 3 basic questions. And when we're talking about what, how, and for whom to produce, we're not just talking about things. We're also talking about services. We're talking about schools. We're talking about the police. We're talking about anything that is produced in an economy that has to be either paid for through money or through some other means. The basic and most simple economy is the traditional economy. Traditional economies use resources, use, and social behavior are dictated by ritual, habit, and custom. And thinking about that, think about traditional cultures. So the Aborigines in Australia, the Inuits in northern Canada. You're talking about hunter and gathering trading societies. So some of these societies don't even use money. The main advantage is that what, how, and for whom they produce is determined by customs, tradition, and needs. So in traditional societies, they may not use money for anything. You might have a whole society that works together. Think about old days. Think about the Native Americans of past, where you had your hunters, and they hunted, and they brought back the meat for their families. You have the people in the village that sew and cook and teach the children. And nobody pays for anything. You just all work together to produce the things that are needed. So what, how, and for whom they're produced, it's based on the needs of the society, and everybody works together to get it. The main disadvantage of this society is that it discourages new ideas and new ways of doing things because they do things the way they've always been done. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't mixes in these cultures nowadays. So even the Inuits up in Canada, they might sell some of their goods to tourists to get some money so that they can get tools that make it easier for them to work. But it's that very basic society. And after that, we get more complicated. So the next one we'll talk about is the command economy. In a command economy, a central authority makes the major decisions about what, who, and for whom to produce. Command, think of those first four letters, communism. In a pure communist country, the government will control everything, including housing, jobs, everything, and they would distribute things based on what people need. So in a command economy, a central authority, generally the government, makes all those major decisions. Now, we don't have any pure command economies in the world today. The closest we come is to North Korea, and we can talk a little bit about them later. But most countries, it's more of a socialist economy. It's more modern, somewhat more liberal. And let me bring up the graphic. Excuse my language, or my coughing. Okay, so in a command economy, for whom, what, and how does a command economy allocate its resources? So this is Cuba, which up until a couple of years ago was also one of the closest things to communism that we had. The Cuban marketplace represents all the major of the common characteristics of a command economy. What resources are allocated? So here you see food. The types of goods and services are determined by government preferences, like those items for sale in the Cuban marketplace. Basically, even though food's being sold here, the government would have some say in what the people are bringing to the market, so what they're producing, how much of it's being produced, and who they're selling it to. Now here they're selling it to each other, but even the food produced, the government has a say in what crops are planted, so that they are kind of determining what food people are eating. How are resources allocated in a command economy? The way in which goods and services are allocated is determined by government preferences. So the government could say, you are going to make potatoes or plant potatoes. And then the next guy, he can say, you are going to plant guava. And the next guy, they can say squash or whatever it is. So the government kind of determines what you're going to produce. And that also kind of determines on how much money you're going to make. Now, it's not as strict as that in Cuba necessarily, but that's just a really good example of where the government's stepping in and saying, this is what you can and can't do. A command economy determines that a market like this is actually needed and determines that it should be built and may operate to provide these types of goods and services. So unlike in America, where you might have farmer markets that are kind of cropping up all over the place, which generally does need a little bit government intervention, just saying, yep, we'll give you the license to do that. But the government's not going to step in and say what you can sell as long as you're selling legal products. It's a little bit different in command economies. And then finally, the economic preferences of the government determine what items are being sold. So the government decides that, not the people. So that's just things to know about a command economy. I'm going to shut up for a second. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. So then you have advantages and disadvantages. And we're going to get to a chart at the end that I can show you where all this stuff is in one place. The main advantage is that it can change direction quickly and allow many citizens to receive goods and services that they couldn't afford. So a good thing about a command economy, or when you look at socialism, is that the government, if it does control a lot of things, it can also make changes quickly versus if it's all private citizens, that's much, much harder to do. So for example, healthcare in socialized countries, the government can provide healthcare to everyone. And that's definitely a service that people need. And maybe they couldn't afford in a country like America, where we have privatized healthcare. A disadvantage would be there's not a lot of individual freedom to choose. A lot of times the production of goods is at low cost because the government needs to disperse it to everyone, so the quality is not as good. You also have the government making most of the decisions, or some bureaucracy, generally government run, making the decisions, so that individuals lose some of their freedoms. Okay, so that's command. And then the last big one is economies based on markets, or market economies. This is based on capitalism. And capitalism is what we have here, where entrepreneurs can come up with ideas to create a business or a product that they can sell to other people. It's based on supply and demand. That's our next unit. We're going to be talking about supply and demand and the price system. So people can spend money on what they want and can own resources privately. So we have innovation, meaning like I talked about, and I want you guys to start thinking about, because the activity we're doing on Friday, we're going to be looking at, if you were, and I've asked this question before, if you were to start a business or if you were to sell a product, what would it be? So we're looking at innovation in order to lower the cost of goods. It's easy to start a business here, and it's competitive. So there's hot dogs there, but let's say you create a product and it's good and somebody else is like, oh, I like that idea. Well, they can't make exactly the same product, but they can use your idea to come up with their own. And then this is the chart I was saying. So this is in the slideshow. This is in your, in the review. So you can come here and literally copy off of this if you want. This is just looking at advantages and disadvantages of the 3 types of economies. Okay, do you have any, oh, and I missed something, because it is, I think it's down, well, that's okay. I was just going to show you a graphic on disadvantages of the command economy, but you can check that out if you guys want to. Okay, do you have any questions? All right, so